All right, hey guys, today we are going to go over our third day of solving one-step equations. So please have your math book out and a calculator if you need one, and make sure you are doing the problems together with me. All right, so our learning intention for today is that we're going to be able to write and solve one-step equations. So hopefully by the end of the class, you can write and solve a one-step equation. All right, let's start by going to page 284 and 285 in your math book, and you are just going to find any little space. On page 284, you can use all the side lines, or on page 285, you could use the bottom as well. So we're going to solve these three equations to make sure you feel good. So if you guys could copy the first one down, again, anywhere where you have some space. So first thing I'm going to do is draw my line down through the equal sign. And I want to try to solve for C. So just remember from yesterday, you want to get the C by itself. And right now, you're going to think this says 0.2 times C. So you want to think, what's the opposite of multiplying by 0.2? Well, it's dividing by 0.2. Again, you always want to get that C by itself. If I divide that side by 0.2, I need to divide this side by 0.2. So you can grab your calculator and type in 6 divided by 0.2. And I end up with, over here, 0.2 divided by 0.2 is just 1C. And then negative 6 divided by 0.2 is negative 30. So there is my solution to this equation. Okay, so that's one type we did yesterday. All right, a second type, let's do this one. If you guys can copy number 2 down. Again, find some space anywhere on the lines. You can even go back to page 283 if you want, if you ran out of space. So anywhere on this page. Okay, so this time you want to get the y by itself. So again, your goal is to always get this by itself. So I want to try to get rid of negative 5, 6. Well, right now it's just an addition problem. So you're going to think, how can I get rid of a negative 5, 6? Well, I'm going to add a positive 5, 6 to this side and a positive 5, 6 over here. Okay, so let's see what happens. All right, so here that makes 0. I'm left with just y. Over on the other side, I need to add negative 1/3 plus 5, 6. So you guys should know when you have fractions, you need a common denominator. So I'm going to make this out of 6. I'm going to times it by 2, times it by 2. I get negative 2, 6 plus 5, 6. Well, I know that is positive 3, 6. Okay, now last thing you should do is try to simplify it. 3 goes into both of these. So 3 divided by 3 is 1. 6 divided by 3 is 2. So my answer is y equals 1/2. There is my solution to this equation. All right, so let's do one more. Again, please find some space to do this one. Okay, so again, you want to get the y by itself. So if you read this, it says negative 2/5 times y equals 20. So the opposite of timesing is dividing. So you could just divide, or we learned yesterday, if you want to get rid of that fraction, you can actually multiply by the reciprocal. So I can actually multiply by negative 5 over 2. If I do that, quick refresher, you get 10 on the top and 10 on the bottom, and then y. 10 over 10, that's the same as 1y. Over here, I need to times by negative 5 over 2. Okay, I'm going to put a 1 under here. I'm going to pause the video. I want you to try to finish this up and see what you get. All right, so if I multiply, 20 times negative 5 is negative 100 over 2. You can divide by 2. You get negative 50 over 1, or just negative 50. So my solution to this one is y equals negative 50. All right, so that was a quick refresher of the types of equations that we solved yesterday. Today, we are going to learn how to write one-step equations. So today, we're going to actually be writing an equation. So if you can flip your math book to page 285, and we're going to try this. Okay, so it says, many real-world situations can be represented with equations. So consider the following problem. The highest recorded temperature in Warsaw, Missouri is 118 degrees Fahrenheit. I'm going to underline that, so if you guys can do that or highlight it. It says this is 158 degrees greater than the city's lowest recorded temperature. And then it says, well, what is the lowest recorded temperature? Okay. So I want you to go ahead and just pause the video, and I want you to read through what they did, and then we'll talk about it. All right, so it looks like first they just kind of described the problem. They said, oh, okay, the highest recorded temperature is 158 greater than the lowest. Then they said, well, a variable. I do not know the lowest recorded temperature. So they said, I need to define a variable. So they said, hey, what if I use T as the lowest recorded temperature? Okay, and then they said, let's try to write this in an equation. They said, okay, well, the highest temperature is 118. That was 158 degrees greater than the lowest. Well, if the lowest we call T, 158 greater than that is adding 158. That should get me to 118, the highest recorded temperature in Warsaw. Warsaw. So there is my equation. So you just wrote an equation. Now we could also solve this because we have been solving this. So if I draw my line down through my equal sign, I want to get this T by itself. So I'm going to think, what's the opposite of adding 158? Well, I'm going to add in a negative 158 to both sides to keep it balanced. Over here I get 0, so I end up with T equals, and then if I take 158, take away 18, it looks like I have more negatives, so the answer is negative 40. So the lowest recorded temperature is negative 40. All right, let's flip our math book to page 286. And let's read through the example. It says a stingray is at a certain depth in the ocean. Now, we don't know what depth it is right now. It says after ascending, that means it goes up 5.5 feet. Now its depth is negative 14 and 5/6 feet. Okay, so I had my stingray somewhere. Okay, I'll just draw like a fish. And I don't know how deep it is. I know it goes up 5.5 feet. Now the depth is, this is where it's at. It's at negative 14 and 5/6. I want to know, can we find that initial depth? Where was that stingray to start with? So since I don't know that, I'm going to call that X or D. Well, actually they use D, so I'll use D. They're going to call that D. They do not know the original depth. So I'm going to start by saying, hey, here's my original depth. I went up 5.5. And now I'm at or equal to negative 14 and 5/6. So there is my equation. So again, I said, hey, my original depth was here. I went up 5.5, and now I end at negative 14 and 5/6. Now to solve this, okay, you would draw your line down and you would think, okay, first thing maybe you would say, I need to get rid of 5.5 or positive 5.5. So I'm going to add in a negative 5.5 to both sides. Okay, and then you can kind of see what they did over on the side. So I'm just going to kind of follow that. They said, hey, 5.5, that's the same as 5 and 3/6. So they got a common denominator. And then they added in negative 5 and 3/6 to both sides. Okay, since these are negatives, they just combine them. They said, oh, negative 19 and 8/6. And then they saw 8/6, that's over 1. So they said, hey, if I change that, if I do 8 divided by 6, it goes in there once, which is 6. And then I got 2 left over. So that's really 1 and 2/6. So then they said, oh, I was at negative 19, so now I'm at negative 20 and 2/6. And then they just simplified it. They divided it down into negative 20 and 1/3. So that was the initial depth. All right, let's go to page 286 and let's try the check. So I want you to read through it and see which equation you think is correct, and then we'll kind of go through it, and then we'll solve it. All right, so the problem said at the end of the week, Madison had negative $55.98 in her checking. So that was what she ended up with. This is $202.64 less than the amount she had at the beginning of the week. Okay, so first thing, I don't know how much she had at the beginning of the week. Looks like they used an M. Okay, so at the beginning of the week, she had this much. Okay, and then it looks like $202.64 less than that. That would be like subtracting. So minus 202.64. And then she ended with, so that's going to be equal to negative 55.98. Now, they wrote it a little different than I did, so I'm just going to find that one. It looks like that matches up with A, because it's got what she started with, take away 202.64, and then equals that negative 55.98. Okay, so now if I solve that, you guys can find a little space. Your goal is to get the M by itself. So right now I see a negative or subtracting 202. So I'm going to add 202.64 to both sides to keep this balanced. Okay, I end up over here. That makes a 0. And then m equals, you may use a calculator on this. You can do 202.64, take away, oops, minus 55.98. And you end up with $146.66 was her beginning balance at the start of the week. Now let's see if that actually makes sense if we kind of did a check. So she started with that much, and now she ends up with $55.98, and it looks like she spent $202.64. That would kind of make sense. All right, let's try one more. You can just do this over on the side. So it says Larry had some money in his account, and he spent $275 on a shopping spree on some fly drippy gear. Larry had $32 left in his account after he went shopping. Can we write an equation to see how much money he had in his account to start with, since we don't know that? So first thing, let's give that a variable. I'm just going to use x. We don't know how much he started with. Okay, so he had that much money in his account. He spent $275. If he spent it, it's going to be like subtraction or a negative $275. And in the end, so he had left, that's going to be equal $32 left. Okay, so now if I solve this equation, your goal is to get the x by itself. So I'm going to add 275, right? Because that's the opposite of subtracting 275. Okay, if you do that to one side, you have to do it to the other side of the equation. Okay, this makes a 0 pair. I get x equals, I should have lined this up better. I'm going to do that quick. So if I put 275, I get 7, 10, 307. So it looks like x equals, he originally had $307 in his account. Now if you want to do a check, you could go to the original equation. Instead of x, I'll put 307 minus 275. Does that equal 32? If I work it out, 32 does equal 32. I did it correctly. All right, so your learning goal for today is, are you able to write and solve a one-step equation, okay, with rational numbers, basically with fractions and decimals? So can you write an equation like this, and then can you also solve it? But it might have fractions and decimals in it. So now you guys are going to do some practice. You are going to go into Class Kick, and you should see a January 26th Class Kick. I would like you to try these problems. Do your best. If you need help on a problem, you can ask the teacher, or you can put your hand up and I will answer questions tomorrow, or you may ask a friend for help as well. So please just try these and do your best. And tomorrow we'll kind of get started on some more equations.